Why Lance Stroll is the most punchable driver in Formula One. Lance Stroll, the human embodiment of the phrase, "Some people are just born lucky." Formula One has always had paid drivers, but no one has ever taken the concept to such absurd heights. Most paid drivers are like cheap fireworks. They burn bright for a moment, explode spectacularly, and then disappear forever. But Stroll, he's a generational case of nepotism. A man who has been spoon-fed a Formula One career on a silver platter and still manages to make it look like a chore. There are bad drivers, there are entitled drivers, and then there's Stroll, who somehow manages to be both while acting like he's doing everyone a favor by showing up on race day. He crashes like he's being paid per incident, treats his engineers like inconveniences, and carries himself with the energy of a man being forced to work at his dad's company. Which, let's be honest, is exactly what's happening. Formula One is supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. And yet, among the Hamiltons, Verstappens, and Alonsos, we have this guy. A driver who competes with the enthusiasm of someone who just remembered they left the oven on. So, why exactly is Lance Stroll the most punchable driver in Formula One? Buckle up. And before we get started, subscribe to Formula One Dramas for more brutally honest F1 breakdowns, savage takes, and deep dives into the sport's biggest disasters. 1. The ultimate pay driver who will never leave. Formula One has had a long history of pay drivers. Some fade into obscurity, like Nicholas Latifi. Some become a meme, like Nikita Mazepin. And a rare few even prove they deserved a shot, like Sergio Perez. But Lance Stroll, he is the final boss of pay drivers. He isn't just surviving off daddy's money, he is thriving because of it. When he first joined Williams in 2017, he looked like exactly what he was, an inexperienced rich kid with more sponsorship money than talent. In any normal world, his lackluster performances would have sent him packing after a season or two. But Stroll isn't bound by the same rules as everyone else. His father, billionaire Lance Stroll, didn't just bankroll his career. He outright bought an entire Formula One team to guarantee his son would never have to fight for a seat. First, it was Williams. When that was no longer viable, his dad purchased Force India and rebranded it as Racing Point. When that wasn't fancy enough, they turned it into Aston Martin. Through it all, Stroll has remained untouchable, while far more deserving drivers have been sent packing. At any other team, a driver who consistently underperforms and gets annihilated by every teammate he's ever had would be out. But for Lance, there is no threat. No amount of poor results, embarrassing crashes, or radio meltdowns will cost him his seat because he is literally the owner's son. That's the most infuriating part. He doesn't just exist in F1, he exists without consequences. And no matter how much he underdelivers, he walks around like he's a future world champion instead of a glorified participant. 2. He drives like someone being forced to work for his dad. Most drivers dream of Formula One from childhood. They fight for every opportunity, claw their way through the ranks, and give everything they have for a shot at the pinnacle of motorsport. Then there's Stroll, who looks like he can't be bothered half the time. His body language screams, "I'd rather be anywhere else." His post-race interviews are legendary, not for their insight, but for how dead inside he sounds.
Killing the tires, so that's never good around here.
Behind the wheel at the moment.
I don't know.
How does this change your mindset for the weekend? Is it now a test session? Are you going to go for it in the sprint?
Yeah, no points, but yeah, it was as
That's the energy of a guy forced into a career he has no passion for. Compare that to someone like Fernando Alonso, who is twice Stroll's age and still talks about racing like it's oxygen. Even Lewis Hamilton, despite winning everything, still finds joy in the sport. But Stroll, his vibe is, "I guess I'll race until my dad sells the team." His lack of enthusiasm would be less offensive if he was actually fast, but he isn't. He's passive, unaggressive, and always outperformed by his teammates. When he overtakes, it looks like an accident. When he defends, it's either dangerously erratic or completely useless. If a midfield battle gets heated, you can count on Stroll to either disappear or put himself in the gravel. He is quite literally taking up space. 3. He crashes like it's a side hustle. Lance Stroll's true talent isn't racing. It's finding new and inventive ways to crash a Formula One car. Documentary, complete with slow-motion replays and a dramatic orchestral soundtrack. Singapore, 2023. Stroll doesn't just crash in qualifying. He obliterates his Aston Martin so violently in Q1 that the team withdraws him from the race entirely. Not because of injuries, not because of FIA concerns, just because his mechanics took one look at the wreckage and said, "Yeah, no, we're not fixing that." Brazil 2023. If you ever needed a 3-act structure for an F1 disaster class, Stroll's Interlagos weekend had it all. Act 1, spins in qualifying. Act 2, wipes himself out in the sprint race. Act 3, becomes the first driver in years to beach himself before the race even starts. That's right, he managed to ruin his race before he even made it to turn 1. Austin 2022. Stroll decides to defend his position so late against Fernando Alonso that he nearly sends him into orbit. Alonso's car gets launched into the air, somehow lands without flipping, and Stroll gets a well-deserved penalty for trying to play real-life bumper cars. Malaysia 2017. On after the race is already over. With everyone in cool-down mode, he still manages to drive straight into the side of Sebastian Vettel on the cool-down lap. Post-race crashes are so rare that even the commentators were confused about what had just happened. China, 2019, crashing. During a race is one thing. Crashing under a safety car is next-level stupidity. While every other driver on the grid manages to do the most basic thing in motorsport, keep the car on track while going at a controlled speed, Stroll rear-ends Daniel Ricciardo like a distracted driver in morning traffic. The best part, he never takes responsibility. His go-to excuse is always the car, as if Aston Martin's engineers are conspiring to sabotage him for fun. The reality? Stroll could be given prime Adrian Newey design machinery, a full lap head start, and a prayer from the Pope, and he'd still find a way to pin it. 4. Entitled, arrogant, and somehow always the victim. Being a bad driver is one thing. Being a bad driver with a superiority complex, that's next level insufferable. It's one thing to lack talent. It's another thing entirely to lack talent and act like you're a misunderstood genius being held back by everyone around you. Lance Stroll is never at fault. If he gets out-qualified, bad strategy. If he crashes, somebody cut him off. If his teammate is miles ahead, it's just not his weekend. He's the kind of guy who would spill coffee on himself and blame the mug manufacturer for not making it spill-proof. His radio messages sound like a teenager trying to get out of doing chores. Engineer: Lance, we need to adjust our braking points. Stroll: yeah, well, maybe you should build a better car. This is not a one-off moment. Stroll has made dismissive, condescending remarks toward his engineers countless times, as if the only thing stopping him from winning a championship is that he's been saddled with a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing. Never mind that Fernando Alonso, in the same car, is regularly fighting for podiums while Stroll is battling with Haas. Then there's his attitude toward his own team, which veers between childish tantrums and outright aggression. Remember Qatar, 2023, when he got knocked out in Q1 again and responded by shoving his trainer on live TV? That wasn't frustration from a driver desperate to improve. It was entitlement boiling over because things didn't go his way. This wasn't the first time he treated his team like an inconvenience either. His body language, his radio tone, his complete inability to accept blame. It all screams, "How dare this be happening to me?" instead of, "How can I improve?" And yet, despite all this, he walks around like he's a future world champion, being held back by a subpar team. Every interview, every radio message, every mopey press conference after another embarrassing Q1 exit gives off the same delusional energy. I could be winning if only everyone else did their jobs better. Reality check, Lance. The problem isn't the car, it's you. Conclusion: the F1 villain nobody likes. Lance Stroll isn't just a bad driver. He's an insufferable one. He's an F1 seat blocker, an entitlement machine, and a walking, talking meme of everything wrong with modern Formula One. He doesn't fight for results. He doesn't show passion. He doesn't take responsibility. But thanks to his dad's bottomless wallet, he's never leaving. Until Lance Stroll sells Aston Martin or gets tired of this multi-billion-dollar vanity project, we're stuck with Lance, crashing, whining, and wasting a grid spot that could have gone to someone who actually earned it. Subscribe to Formula One Dramas for more brutally honest F1 breakdowns, because let's be honest, as long as Stroll is in F1, we'll never run out of material.